Hey, what's up, everyone? So today is going to be a Othello team match between Team Australia and Team Singapore. So as usual, you have that 6 versus 6 tournament format where each player gets to play one another at least once and at least alternating in terms of every round color. So over here we have the Team Australia led by Matthew Vinar and of course Team Singapore with myself helming the team. So it should be an interesting one. So good luck to everyone for the friendly match. Uh, hey everyone, this is gonna be round one of the Team Australia versus Team Singapore team match, and of course the first opponent I have is Matthew Vinner actually from Australia, and he's one of the top few players in Australia. So this should be a good match. So let's begin with playing white. I'll go with perpendicular. Okay, so just going down, it seems like he's going for the usual book to tiger. Okay, so the typical response is to play either no kung or kom off or kung. So for today's match, I'll go with no kung and just try a side variation perhaps within that branch of openings. Okay, so he's regrouped into the center. We'll just take a quick cut into the center, just flipping one disc in one direction. Okay, so he's cut out over here. So this opening tends to lead to high variance game, so it tends to be a little risky. So right now I would think that black is occupying a very nice position over here, controlling this mini line over here between this C4 coordinate and the E2 coordinate. So right now I don't have access to either one of those, so I'll either have to go for maybe B3 or perhaps G4 to centralize. So either one of those options should work. This probably might be too loud to E7 and would give away a very easy C4. So let's go ahead for G4 perhaps. Okay, so black has gone into D1. So this is quite a fixed book sequence. So I'll go for D6, which is basically just flipping one disc and just trying to regroup those discs into the center as much as possible. So one of the dangerous point about Matt's opening over here is that this opening tends to grab the edge quite a lot. So just bearing in mind of time, try to go for probably a safer approach. I'll just centralize over here, just regroup into the center. So he's gone on to the side. He looks pretty well prepared for this. Maybe I'll try a different side variation perhaps. And just cut out over here the C1. Basically just trying to contest for the top edge as much as possible while trying to centralize. And then over here, once black has captured the edge, he has this C3 disc that allows him to regroup. So we probably want to try to temporarily prevent that. So we'll go for B3, just removing that excess. And of course, if you were to try to regain that excess, it may be a bit loud for him, perhaps. So right now, just occupying the center. Black still probably looks to be occupying a very edge play kind of approach, which is definitely risky for both sides. So let's grab this equilibrium edge to the top first, which is probably a very passive move, just a waiting move to see where the opponent plays. Okay, right now it does seem a little difficult for me to advance as well because he has this disc that allows him to take one move here for free. Let's go into the center and just create that edge, and perhaps we could actually form that edge to the top where I give up the corner and just try to wedge. So that's the typical strategy when your opponent establishes such a strong unbalanced edge to the side. Okay, let's go for the C square over here. So because black has established a very strong centralizing position and an edge play position, it's becoming increasingly difficult for me to find moves, so I am kind of forced to actually just centralize this way between this diagonal, and at the same time, I'm reduced to probably just a few safe moves. So I'm just waiting for black to actually flip this white disc to actually unpoison this move potentially. Of course, black does have that free move as well to a4, and consequently to b4 as well for 2 consecutive tempos, so that's a bit risky for me as well. So I believe that Matt is probably considering the 2 tempos against what I can play to the top right as well. Okay, so yes, he's done it, and basically approach the left. He's probably gonna go for 2 consecutive moves if possible. He's gonna continue with b4. So what we want to do is just try to work our way around it. So instead of just going into this g2 disc that flips 4 discs in 2 different directions, I want to actually force feed this edge first so that I can force feed one more time to the x square. And of course, if he chooses to defend the edge by playing maybe g6, I would then have this unpoison move over here. So if he does take the corner, I would go into the wedge and attack the corner, trade off this top edge against that corner and this edge, as well as perhaps a little bit of parity for him here. So right now I'm expecting him to actually follow through with b4 perhaps as a waiting move. Yeah, if he doesn't want to actually just consolidate the top right. Okay, so he has played that defensive move. Probably also waiting for me to break to the right. So this is poison. I wouldn't want to play that. I have that additional x square move to think about. So if I do play the x square move, I do limit my options. So I'll go on to the bottom at e7 first and just sort of wait and see how the opponent responds over here. If he does take b4, I would then follow with f6 since f7 since f8 would then be poisoned. Yeah, let's go ahead with that. And of course, if he does take the safe c4 in continuation, I might be forced to jump into g2 actually. Yeah, which would actually be a very difficult position for me to play on. So I think Matt is actually doing a great job here, sealing off my excess. So I can't play this because I would lose my excess over here. So let's go for the direct approach and just approach this mini diagonal just to ensure I have access. In case I lose all access to this square, he would then capture the corner and be able to take 2 consecutive moves and just defend the edge. Then, of course, playing the c square earlier would then be meaningless. So right now, I believe I'm in a tough losing position. Both players just under 3 minutes since this is a 7 minutes time control friendly match. So probably time is going to be quite critical. So as much as I try to avoid using time as an advantage, because usually at the World Championship you have an abundance of time, what you want to focus on is actually the quality of moves rather than just trying to make some tricks or just hope for your opponent to time out. But for the sake of a friendly match and also wanting to maximize performance, I would probably have to factor in time. So yeah, I think Matt is usually quite a deep thinker. So towards the end game, and in a leading position, he might actually be trying to secure his win comfortably. So that could be a slight advantage when it comes to time, perhaps. So let's play this, just a quick centralizing move and sort of like a waiting move for him as well. So now the problem is he has this potential Landau opportunity to control this line. I'm definitely at an advantage. It's just about whether Matt can actually capture the winning line within the time control. So if I do play this, he would then just go in over here, which seems a fairly easy move for him to go to. Let's just go ahead with that, and probably now I'm forced in a bad position where I basically don't really have many options, and think it's going to be tough. I would definitely have to just try to rely on parity as much as possible here. Probably giving up the corner and then advancing over here just to force an even square region over here. So let's go with that. Just trying to avoid being swindled. Hopefully I won't, because he has this f8 disc that creates the diagonal cut either way. So if he does take the corner and I jump into g7, this somewhat becomes a parity region, but it's a very weak parity region for me to just try to hang on as much as possible. So I'm not too sure whether this would work out actually. But yeah, I guess I just have to try, given the time constraint and also the position disadvantage that I'm in. So right now, I'm probably just approaching the 1 minute mark for both players. It is a bit difficult, but sometimes when you're losing, it's probably even easier to actually select moves because you basically have no choice. So it tends to be easier to actually select the lesser of two evils, perhaps, sometimes. So let's just continue with creating that parity region over here so that we try to avoid being swindled, I hope. But it does seem that there is a danger of getting into that situation. Okay, so the opponent has played that position. So just go for that parity region. So everywhere is just an even region, but black is in control. So I'm just hoping that he doesn't find a line that cleanly sweeps all the discs up. And hopefully I can just, edge out a win by parity as much as possible. Okay, so wherever he plays, I'll just follow. So that's the easy part for me. But yeah, I mean, if he played a brilliant sequence, then I guess I wouldn't have much of a choice. So let me just count. 31 minus 4, 27 plus 6. So this is a 33, 31 sequence perhaps. 31 minus 1 plus 3, that's 34. So playing the corner is probably easy to get the win. White, a6, 30 minus 7. Minus 7, 23, plus 5 and 9. Yeah, I guess that's probably a safe way to close the game. Probably grabbing a corner and securing parity. Okay, GG, Matt. So I guess that game was a bit lucky for me and kind of abused parity, perhaps. Okay, so this is gonna be round 2 of the Team Australia versus Team Singapore team match. My opponent this round is Scott from Australia. So yeah, just starting off as black with my typical e6 favorite orientation starting move, perhaps. So I've played Scott once at the World Othello Championship. I think round 1 for one of it. Can't remember which year, maybe 2016. And I think he did play the Rose variation to Bagat opening. So that was a very interesting game, and I somehow got lucky through there. So today I'm just going to share with him the Shaman opening, perhaps, and just try to make sense of that and just share that sequence with him, perhaps. So let's go with the Shaman opening. So just going to the edge and just flipping one disc, just trying not to flip too many discs. Okay, so he's played the book sequence, which I will then play the tail line of it on a quiet move to f6 actually. So yeah, for the Shaman opening playing as black, usually if you don't know, it can tend to be a little confusing for white, perhaps in the mid game. So I do have that slight advantage of the opening knowledge. So over here there are two options to either play to c4 or f5. So in this case, f5 is a regrouping move to just stay to my side and just wait for the opponent to break. And if I do go to c2, probably expecting him to jump down to d7 in response. So I think I'll just try to reserve f5 for later on because of this disk to e5 that I can flip again with one more additional move. So I'll go ahead with c4, just trying to preserve one more move for myself. So for this position, I believe I'm slightly ahead at the moment. So it becomes a little of a dilemma for white to choose between playing maybe b4 as a quiet move that flips only one disc, or that also allows me to just go on for an easy f5. But probably he might think that he needs to actually just try to prevent that from happening and would then consider b5. Alternatively, he could just try to work his way around and just consider d7. Okay, so he's gone on to take b4, in which case I would then probably take a quick move to f5 just to regroup to the side. Probably okay, yeah. So he did play d7, which is a very nice penetrating move that would potentially follow with actually e8 to do this diagonal line control. So if white does play this next, these three discs are white, and he then has this mini diagonal line control, which I have no access of cutting into the center to, and I would have to actually work my way around. So bearing in mind that I want to maintain some access between this centralizing axis and potentially this cross back, I would actually choose to play over here to b3. So this is just to try to retain more disk in order to retain centralizing options. So I've played this sequence a couple of times as well. So the likely move for white, yep, over here to b5. So he's played it. So we'll just form a pair to the edge below, which is probably quite defensive edge play because these two pockets of spaces to c7 and also f7 are empty. So I would then be able to extend on either end of b8 or g8. So let's go with that. And one more advantage about forming this pair right now is that I could follow with additional tempo to c7. But right now c7 is poisoned, so if white does choose to elect and play b6, I would then have a nice quiet move to c7. So it really depends on how white responds right now. So another move that white might play to is to actually just cut out to g5, which removes my access to a nice c7. So that just depends on whether he finds it a little too loud. If it is all right for him, he would play it, and I would then try to search for the access back to c7 by playing maybe e2 in this case. Okay, so just doing a quick double check before I just pounce on e2 perhaps. I think that's fine. So one of the disadvantages about just trying to create that long stretch of disc across is that you sort of poison your disc on the left and right. But if you do have pockets of spaces that you're targeting, for example, this disc that I've established creates a move over here to g6, and this particular disc that I've established here creates a move over here to c7, then I guess it might be fine and justifiable to do so. So, okay, so right now I have two options to c7 or g6. So I'm pretty much trying to weigh between these two moves and just see which one works out better. Probably try to find a rationale behind it, I guess. So the easiest rationale is that if I play this, he probably can't play this. If I can play this right now and he can play this, I could still have an easy response to over here at f7. So it's kind of challenging to try to tell the difference between these two moves. So I'll just try to read further into the game. So I think playing this move actually opens up a potential centralizing move for white back over here. So I'll try to remain defensive and go for c7 just to form that solidified pair, and probably more like a hollow 4-disc edge to the bottom. And just wait for his move. So let's see where the opponent plays. So over here, if white chooses to engage any of my black discs on the top, either to the top or to the left, I would then be able to continue with that good move, perhaps to g6 and just follow through. Or if he does engage this particular disc and unpoisons this move, I would then be able to play here. But nope, since he's played this move, I'll go ahead with the easy pair, forming up a pair over here to the bottom, and just hopefully that's enough tempo to just play a very straightforward H play. Okay, so right now I have two consecutive tempos over here potentially. If I do play to this move over here to the right, he would then have only one safe move to the left. So let's just go ahead with that, and hopefully that puts up a good position for myself to close off the game if possible. But yeah, Scott is an amazing player, and I've seen some of his games over the years, and it's really very impressive. So I can't let my guard down for sure, because he's definitely able to pull up some tricks even in a desperate situation. So right now, yep, white could actually just feed off the corner and just try to go for Landau and try to win back that tempo. So I'm not too sure where I should actually play to follow up here. Okay, if I take this and he goes for that g7 move, the disc that provides him access for that consecutive tempo is e7. So if I go here, white goes here, I wouldn't have access over here, but I would be able to just cut off that access potentially over here, which he would then probably just play one more move down the line to create this white disc back, which would then actually probably give him access back into this position. So it's not too great for me, perhaps. So I don't really have much time, so I'll just go ahead with that straightforward approach. He's probably just going to go in for the Landau or just cut off the excess. And in exchange, he'll probably go for a strong excess cut out, at the same time removing this disc that gives me access over here, right? So that is going to be challenging to work out of. I could just potentially consider cutting one more time over here. Okay, but probably not. I think that's not the safe approach to continue. So Scott did find a nice cutout. So that's a very strong sequence. So I'll just cut out to the center and just try to get him to remove this so that I can proceed on the right hand side. So right now the bottom left is probably where the action is going to be at. I have 1 minute thinking time, very short of time. Probably have to try to look for safe moves to play. Anticipating him to play a6 over here actually. Probably because he wants to break the structure and also try to go for two consecutive moves to the left. So in response, oh okay, he doesn't play a6. That is a bit of a surprise. So I'll just grab the edge and anticipate him to play here, for which I would respond to a6 and close off that even square region to the left. And he would then jump in over here, perhaps on the x square. I would then go for that full sweep to the left, and he would grab the corner. I would jump in for parity, and then he would then hit down the line on the left on the A column. So I think if all goes well, I might be able to actually seal off the game, probably solely because of the H move over here. So let's just sweep down this line. Okay, we'll have to defend this. So right now this has become a quiet move. We'll just go for it. So yeah, I think if there are no surprises, this game should be more or less closed, I guess. Just a bit of luck and a slight advantage in the opening, perhaps. So just play a safe H play sequence on the right down to the left. And let's see. Okay, I think this is probably more. Okay. So good game, Scott. Thanks a lot. And of course, good luck for the next game. Okay, so this is going to be round 3 of the Team Australia versus Team Singapore match. So let's start. So playing one of the top players of Team Australia, so this should be a tough match. Okay, let's begin. So I'll be playing as white right now. Let's go for that perpendicular option. And okay, opponent has chosen to play rose variation. We'll just go for the usual book opening to centralize. Okay, so black has actually chosen to take up the straight cut down to Iago opening. So this is tends to be a bit more challenging to play. So right now, let's either choose between playing c2 or c3, depending. So the usual book move is to c3. So let's go with that approach and see how that goes. Okay, so black has selected to play to b5. Right now, on the tail end would be a good move perhaps, on a quiet move. Another option would be to just play to straight cut, diagonal cut actually, to f6. So let's go with that centralizing move. Okay, so the typical book sequence of this is to just regroup to the right. So let's go for f5, regrouping maneuver, and wait for the opponent. Yeah, so the opponent actually would then play a bit of a rotation, which is just trading off moves on the edge. So since I don't have a nice move over here, I would look for one by playing b3. That would actually provide access back over here to regroup at e7. So that is an approach. So let's go with b3. Okay, so right now there are two approaches. I can either go down here or here to actually capture the excess, or to just attempt to recapture e6. So I'm thinking that this is probably a bit weak in terms of just trying to look for that excess down. I mean, temporarily it could work actually. So let's go ahead with this. Perhaps if we have potential extension down by black to prevent it, and then we could then just cut back. But black would also be able to actually just cut into d2 and centralize. So of course, if black goes to d2, I would then go for that move that I've been looking for at e6. Okay, so opponent has played a nice split move, so that allows the opponent to actually get both tempo, perhaps on the tail end of this, and also one more tempo over here. So it's hard to defend both sides at once. So let's try and go for the centralizing move, just to go to the center and just wait for black to actually re-centralize to d2 perhaps. So over here, the next good move for black would be to play to f2, perhaps. So right now, I would want to just defend that by poisoning it and playing f1. So hopefully that works out. So it's becoming a bit of a difficult position, but probably anticipating black to actually just cut out over here in the future to g4 to capture this e4 disc that provides access to c6. Okay, so black did take g4, which creates access to a nice c6. So that is probably my primary concern right now. So I will probably go ahead to just block the move, and if black goes for that easy b6, I would control temporarily this diagonal line by playing a5. So over here, it is getting a little bit tricky because the tempo control trade-off is getting a bit complicated. Okay, so black has played an unexpected a2, which, yeah, it's definitely not a move that I would expect to happen. So we'll just go for that equilibrium edge over here. Not exactly too sure whether that would work out in my favor. Black would probably go to g3 next to just centralize and bring the entire group of this to the top right. So right now, the thing to take note of is black having this mini diagonal control over here. So if black does take g3, I'll go for c1. And if potentially black may choose to actually go to b6 to just try to go for this particular line control within this diagonal between the b6 square and also the f2 square. Okay, so right now, very straightforward quiet move for me would be to then just jump over here to f2, just flipping two discs directly, and just try to sandwich my disc in between. So black is actually quite effectively nullifying some of my excesses and playing quite a strong edge play and forced line control. So it does seems to be getting a little tighter over here. So I'm gonna go for this move just to regroup into the center and just wait for black to come out. And if black goes out to g3, a quiet move at h4 would be there for me perhaps. Another option that black may take is h6. Yeah, so either one works, I guess. So in this particular shape, which is more of like a sort of like a knight movement in terms of international chess, these four squares, you typically just break off to the diagonal and just try to feed off the edge and grab two moves perhaps over here. So that's one option to consider. You probably don't want to just leave this shape untouched. So let's just break into the diagonal shape over here. And black essentially can choose between these two moves. Typically, this is not great for black, so I don't expect black to play at g3. So h4 or h5 is more likely to follow. So no matter where black plays, either h4 or h5, I think I should still be playing g3 either way. So I believe that probably h5 might be better for black. Okay, I could either feed off the edge and just grab this, or I could just grab this right now. So I think I'll go ahead to grab it at g3. So reason being is because black cannot feed off h4 and give me an unbalanced edge and at the same time go for that wedge move. So I believe tempo-wise shouldn't be too bad a deal for me. Right now, if I do choose to play to the top left, I would then poison myself and black would then be able to feed off that unbalanced edge and go for the g2 wedge that gives up the corner. So for those reasons, I would definitely have to feed off h4 first, allow black to form up that unbalanced edge to the right, and then probably go for c1, which is an equilibrium edge to the top. Okay, so black has taken that edge. My only choice perhaps to c1, just to contain that position as much as possible, just keep the overall position in balance and just try to survive. And of course for white, because white has natural parity, typically if you're able to sort of survive the aggressive edge play or the excess removal by black, it tends to show up as an easy mid game or end game in the end. So it's usually a little bit about holding out the position as much as possible. Okay, so that's actually a very nice move by black to play the x square, to force the position, remove my excess to d1. So I have no other choice but to jump here. But before I go there, which black would definitely respond over here, what I could perhaps do is actually jump into this position first. Let me see which is better. I believe feeding off the edge is better, and then going for this move should be slightly better. So now the problem is, if I were to jump into the x square way too early, it could potentially lead to a swindle. But if I do take the edge to the right, it also leads to a swindle for me. So this is actually a huge problem for me at the moment. And given that I'm short of time, perhaps g7 would then be the option to just try to hold off that position as much as possible. Let me just go with g7, wait for black to actually attack one of these discs to try to sweep for that swindle, and then I would go for the b2 move, which would actually be just trying to wedge and also retain parity as much as possible. So the problem is if I were to go for this one way too early. Okay, so black has actually tried to go for the forced swindle as early as this particular instance with a loud move. I don't think it's the best, but yeah, I'll probably take the edge to the right first and leave black with no other option but to probably play to the corner. I'm not too sure whether I would actually have one more move to play to, but probably black, white, black might be okay. So black didn't play it, so I'll take it, the corner. And I think given that this is a quiet move, it should be in my favor. So yeah, black has actually run out of moves here. So yeah, I'll just probably complete the game with a sweep. I think that was probably a mistake by black, but yeah, good game. Okay, so this is gonna be round 5 of the Team Australia Team Singapore match, playing as white this time. Uh, Probably gonna go with a diagonal opening instead this time. So let's go with just wrapping around, so there's no difference. Opponent has played, I think this should be a rotated raccoon dog or raccoon dog opening. So yeah, it could actually lead to very powerful checkerboarding positions. So let's just play the normal centralizing move and just observe perhaps. And then go for that centralizing position. Okay, right now I could either choose to flip just one disc with the temporary horizontal line control and retain one more move to f4 in succession, or I could just grab f4 immediately. Alternatively, I could also consider g5 perhaps. So I think a compact shape is probably better, so I'll go with f3 and yeah, just observe and wait. Okay, black has chosen to branch out to the side. I'll just take one disc and retain that group center inside its small shape perhaps, and just wait for positions to actually play to. So black has cut up to the center. Usually when black cuts out to the center this way, it opens up two options. So these two are actually B squares, and the ones on the sides are A squares. So this is an A square, and this is probably an inner A square, and this is an inner B square. So typically when you're faced with this option for just trying to regroup the disc that you've been split up by your opponent, that has been split up by your opponent between an inner B square and an inner A square, you typically go for the inner B one. So I'll just go for that inner B square, just by rule of thumb here for simple, quick decision making. And of course, since I've played this move, the tail end of it would then be a potential weak point where black could play to. So I would expect naturally a g4 response. So let's see if that happens. Okay, so g4 does follow. And right now there is a potential that black would then follow with a c3 move, resulting in this temporary horizontal line control, which can be pretty powerful. So to prevent that from happening, I'm going to play c2 next and just establish one more disc along this horizontal. So even if black does go for c3 right now, I could easily just jump back to c4. Okay, so black has cut out. I'll just jump into the center, a quick, easy centralizing move. Okay, black has jumped right into the center, flipping quite a few discs. So, so usually it's important to actually note what kind of disc that your opponent has flipped and what's the overall shape. I could choose to regroup and centralize over here, or I could actually choose to play on the tail end of this diagonal over here and just grab a quick move to just regroup and perhaps just forget about the top disk instead of just trying to regroup it a little too hard. So let's go. I think if I were to play d2 over here, black may have a quiet move over here. So if I were to play here, black would then potentially jump down to d8, uh, creating this diagonal control potentially. So if I wait up 2 positions, I think maybe d2 is slightly better, it seems. So I'll go for d2. Because if black were to choose to play to g6, I would probably have easy sequences over here to f1. And if black were to follow g6, this would be a quiet move to f2. Okay, black has selected to make a diagonal cut. Okay, so in that case, I'll just grab the top edge. And if black were to remove this disk, I would have an additional tempo to follow with f2. And if black were to choose to play the c7, I would be able to probably play a quick quiet move to f7 in succession. So let's see how that goes. Okay, so black has interacted with this f6 disk and removed it. So this becomes an unpoisoned move and therefore a quiet move. So I'll just go for it, and this would be a very strong edge shape to the top. So right now I'm just looking at this position. I believe I should be relatively comfortable in the lead. Just need to try to maintain that edge play position because the opponent is playing kind of loud and just flipping quite a few discs. So right now, black has that excess over here. I could choose to play over here to h3 and just control this mini diagonal between h4 and also e1. So I'm basically just trying to control this and form a strong edge play to the right. Hopefully I can run my opponent out of moves fairly quickly to end the game, perhaps. So, okay, so right now, probably play a quick move to h5. Opponent goes h4, I'll jump in. He'll feed off the unbalanced edge. I'll grab that unbalanced edge. Then he can't feed the corner to wedge, because if he feeds the corner, I can wedge him back at e1. So let's go with that sequence. Okay, so I'll just grab into the center. He feeds off the unbalanced edge. I'll grab the unbalanced edge. His only choice perhaps is to just feed off this, for which I would wedge first, actually. So this becomes a difficult position for him to play, and perhaps I think he might have run out of moves. So right now, when you're just trying to end the game, it's all about sweeping the interior discs. So in basic endgame strategy, you would then know that if you're in a fairly winning position, what you want to do is just try to sweep all the inner discs as much as possible. So I'll just cut out a clean cut. So one of the ways to consider cutting out for that corner access is to try to find the nearest disc possible that you can flip in order to access the corner. But I wouldn't be able to play this because I would flip the G7 disc that would hand the corner back to him. So I would then have to play E8, which gives me the E5 disc to access the corner. Okay, so over here I have a swindle. I'll take it. I'll take the corner, and then with that consecutive swindle, which basically means consecutive moves in probably a particular region. So it's like a swindle, and it's also gaining tempo. So right now, what I want to do is just try to sweep off the interior disc as much as possible. Not too sure whether this would work out. Perhaps I could go with this move first and sweep the disc in a layered manner, and basically give black an only option this way. So the strength over here is my right edge and also the bottom edge. So by sweeping the disc from right to left, I basically give the opponent limited options, and I believe the C square should be his only option here. So if he plays the c square, I'll probably play here. So that gives him only one option, but to play into a6, for which I can respond to a8 and just continue to sweep the discs across. Okay, so believe that should be quite a simple parity closeout. Let's sweep the entire row across, and finally the last two moves. So good game, Ivan. Knowing that Ivan is a very passionate player and fairly new, so I would definitely encourage him to play more and learn more. Definitely. So good game, Ivan. Thank you very much. Okay, so this is gonna be round 4 of the Team Australia versus Team Singapore match. I'm playing black and playing against Sam of Australia. I believe I met him once at the World Othello Championship just last year. So this should be an interesting match. So he's played the diagonal opening. So typically for the diagonal opening, you have many openings to select from as black, and definitely you can choose the main branch to go to. Right now you can choose like the buffalo, and rotate the raccoon dog. For today, I'd probably go with the snake opening by playing just to the edge, the side. Okay, so he's played to the center, which is the typical book move to actually regroup. I'll just take a chip off to the edge, just trying to maintain my shape as small as possible and just not give up too many positions. So I'll just cut over here right down to the center. So for the snake opening, there are options to actually do what is called a checkerboard. So let's go with that. So this is a checkerboard position where I play a loud move, but in essence I also control multiple lines. So over here this line is controlled, so is this diagonal and also this vertical line. So that is somewhat of a checkerboard position where your opponent is thrown into a difficult position due to multiple line controls. So it could be a bit challenging for white to actually continue from here. Let's just regroup into the center to d6, still maintaining that line control on the vertical front, the diagonal front, and also the vertical front for here and the horizontal over here. So it's a bit of a multiple line control, forcing white out of position perhaps. Okay, so white has played the edge move, which is probably the correct move to play for him to try to continue this sequence. So if black were to go here, white would jump in and create this disc that gives him access over here to d3. So maybe white, black is potentially possible to continue. Okay, let's go to h5. Okay, so white has indeed played down to the center, which has this nice excess move over here. So one option is to just further prevent it, or I could just poison this move by playing here. If I were to play here, the problem is if white responds to h6, I wouldn't be able to access h4. So that would potentially be a problem. But if I don't play here and white plays here in the future and establishes the control, let me see if that works out fine. So I'll go ahead with the diagonal cut out and just wait for white to break out of that shape. If white goes on the tail end of it, I'll just feed off the balance edge perhaps. Okay, white doesn't go for that and cuts off this way, so I'll just cut back into the center, feeding him off the unbalanced edge if he wants to grab it. Okay, white hasn't taken the edge, but instead played the centralizing move, so it just reflects a little bit of reluctance to grab the edge. I'll just group my disc into the center, and probably making this move slightly biased to grabbing that position within the center 16 in the early game, so there are more chances of white playing poison moves, perhaps to the sides, the second parameter, if you will. And of course, white goes, okay, white didn't play here. So white chose to grab the edge right now. So I'll probably grab the top over here and just wait for white's response. If white chooses to play the c7, I would probably follow with c8. Yep, I guess c8 is the logical choice to just play a quiet move against this two lead diagonals. This being the second one over here. Okay, so right now white has actually played quite a nice checkerboarding move as well with this line control and also this diagonal line control. So one option I have is to actually just feed off this edge and just grab into the center. But that would actually be unlocking the move for unlocking the unbalanced edge on the right for white and just reconverting that back to a balanced edge, which is strong for him. So that is probably not what I would like to do. So instead of doing that, I could potentially consider the quiet move here, but forming a one square gap is usually disadvantageous. So let me just cut out to the diagonal, just form an equilibrium edge to the right where both sides can contest for it, and perhaps try to look for this particular disc to try to group into the center, even though I'm observably slower than white for sure to this square. If white plays to this square, I would then be able to play to e1. But in this case, white didn't play to that square, so I would be able to take it. So let's grab that first. And of course, white is probably planning to jump right in over here for a nice edge pair move, perhaps. After which, if he flips this particular disc, d8 becomes unpoisoned for me to follow through. Okay, so white has done that and removed this disc. So right now, d8 is probably a quick, easy move for me to just jump into. And if white goes for c2, I would then have c3. If white goes for c3, I could probably choose to play either c2 or... Okay, he didn't play that, so that's a bit strange, but okay. I'll grab this move to c3, which probably has given me a lifeline. I believe white was definitely in the lead in the opening to mid-game section. I probably made a mistake somewhere, but right now it seems to be slightly in my favor, perhaps. So over here, I could either choose to centralize immediately, or I could choose to leave a one square gap, opening up opportunities for me to play into the pockets of spaces thereafter. For this case, I wouldn't want to do this because if white follows with b6, this is a mini line control for white. So I'll go for this move, anticipating a5, after which I would respond to a4, which is a poison move somewhat. And I would then be able to jump into the center. So right now, white is actually capturing quite a heavy edge play position, while for me, I'm just trying to centralize. Okay, right now, white has gone on to that position, which is a bit unexpected for sure. So if I were to play to a5, white would probably try to feed off the unbalanced edge to me, and after which I could follow with b6, b5, and a6 sequence that feeds off that unbalanced edge to him. So let's go ahead with that and try to probably make some excess and also make this particular lead main diagonal, a bit more crossed with white and black disc. So white, black, and then if white plays right now a4, this would also be a white disc. Okay, so he doesn't take it. So yeah, I guess he's playing a lot of unexpected moves, which I find it quite tricky to actually deal with. Okay, so I'll just jump into the center, grab that easy move to b5 perhaps. Hopefully there isn't anything that I missed. So the more likely situation is white jumping into a4 over here. I would then have to think whether I want to grab the edge to the left, to the top left, or basically feed off that unbalanced edge. So I think I'll just try to feed off that unbalanced edge. I believe white probably wouldn't take that unbalanced edge, but instead try to contest for the e8 move over here and just poison my f8. I would then be somewhat forced to actually take the unbalanced edge. Okay, so if I do take that unbalanced edge, I'll probably have to read a few moves in advance and see whether that works out. Okay, let me just grab the unbalanced edge for fear of losing tempo, perhaps. So white is definitely going to grab that bottom edge because he doesn't have any other safe moves per se. So how do I progress from here? If I were to play any on the bottom right, I would effectively allow him to play a nice b7 move. So probably one activation move that I could play is to play e1 over here, which would back the response to d1 and open up g2 for me to try to actually slot in between. But now I've seen that I don't really have access. I might actually be one move too slow. So that might have been a mistake on my part in terms of setting up that position. Let's go for g8 for fear of short of time. It's going to be a bit tight over here. So chances are he's going to take g1. Okay, so right now I'm kind of stuck actually. So let's go with g7 to just squeeze in. I believe I definitely made a huge endgame mistake earlier without setting up that position. Okay, so he's taken a corner. I'll grab the wedge and go for parity perhaps. Okay, so if white takes to the top right, I would actually lose parity. So that is going to be an issue for me. Okay, the sequence looks kind of strange perhaps for white, the way he's closing out the position. I believe white could have won, but he played some consecutive mistakes, allowing me to somehow take that win. Okay, so this is going to be round 6 and the very last round of the Team Australia versus Team Singapore match. So I'm playing black. I'll go ahead with the usual e6. Hopefully you can close off this friendly match with a nice safe win perhaps. Okay, so opponent has played the parallel opening, which is fairly rare. So if he is well prepared in this opening, it would then be a little challenging for me, perhaps. So opponent has played out to the top right. I'll just regroup and just form that compact shape across. Okay, your opponent has cut out to the center. Typically, I have probably two options. I could either go to c4 quickly or just go to f5. Let's go with f5, just a center cut, and see what happens. Okay, so over here, I'll go for another center cut to f6. So mainly to just control this mini diagonal, at the same time, just trying to create an additional position over here in the future, perhaps to c3. Probably expecting white to actually jump into c7 right now, which is just a one flip of one disk in one direction and just forming that centralizing position. So he didn't do that, and he's gone on to create this particular disk to e6, which gives him a nice access to c4. So if we do like a prevention measure against it, we would then consider f7. So let's go with f7 as a quick prevention measure, and also just to regroup and centralize our disk together. Okay, so opponent has actually played out to the top right to centralize, perhaps, and regroup. So over here, I could choose to play either c8, d8. E8 is too loud because it flips both discs at once to the bottom, so there's no need for me to actually do that. F8 over here is actually sort of inviting white to just jump into the center. So F8, E8, and then maybe I could follow with G6, so that is a possible sequence as well. So I think I would want to go with C8 to threaten and form a pair, which is a typical easy way to actually close off games early, to just form up a very strong balance edge and gain tempo at the same time. So that's why C8 is probably slightly better. A little ambitious, but over here I guess white should actually defend F8 by playing F8 itself. So white doesn't do that, but elects to actually remove that excess for me to play F8 to form the pair. So I would actually just chase for the excess just by playing a simple cut, and just bearing in mind I'm going for this vertical and diagonal line control. So establishing this disc. Okay, so right now white does choose to defend it. So let's go with E8 just to threaten the edge, form that equilibrium edge. So if white jumps in, I would grab the edge. White doesn't jump in, then I'll just wait, perhaps. So in this case, I could probably consider these three options. Either go to the edge, just play a quiet move this way on the tail end of perhaps the entire row here, or I could just go for the centralizing move and just wait. So typically this usually doesn't work out because it's just way too loud and it allows white to do a diagonal cut across. So usually it's between a diagonal cut or a straight cut. So for this case, I'll go for that straight cut. Reason being, I don't really want to position myself too much to the edge at the moment. I think playing towards the center is just generally safer. So let's go with that. Okay, so white has cut out a quick centralizing move for me. Would then just to d2 would be probably a quick move to centralize, even though it's a bit loud, but I think it kind of actually controls that position so fairly well, so it's still all right, I guess. So I'll just continue with one more move to the center. Even though I'm flipping three discs, it's in one direction and typically doesn't really open up many moves for my opponent. And wherever my opponent plays, I probably have a particular move to actually play for a line control, potentially. Okay, so white has played the c2. There's a cut across, so I would actually probably elect to go for either one of these centralizing moves. Another option is to just play to the edge. If I were to play to f3, white could potentially play a nice edge move to a6, which is probably something I don't want to let him do, perhaps. So, and of course, if I were to play to a4 right now, he could then approach either one. Okay, I think I'll just go for a4 here. So the bottom left area being the priority next, and this is only just a one move tempo, so I could potentially wait for white to actually remove it and just look for some quiet moves along the top to play to. So right now white has played out to a6. Typically a diagonal cut like this begs a response to a5, as long as there are any white discs along this diagonal here. So that is fairly poisoned, so that's good for me. If black goes here, white responds by grabbing the edge. He would actually open up moves to these squares for me here. And if he doesn't take the edge, he plays somewhere else, he loses the tempo. So I guess that is actually in my favor. Okay, so white does grab the edge, in which case I would then choose between these moves. So if I were to play to c7, it would then still be a relatively safe move for white to actually play to b6. But if I were to take the b6, c7 would be fairly poisoned for white. So for that reason, I would actually elect to play b6 first. So yeah, it puts white in a slightly tougher position potentially. And white would then have to look for probably flipping this disc in order to access a7 potentially. And over here, if white were to play to d8, I would just simply capture g8. Okay, so white has actually played the move to the top to establish the disc to access a7. So what we're going to do right now is just play one more move, extend it out, and prevent him from doing so. And if he chooses to play the diagonal cut to f1, I would then play c7. Now, if he had chosen to play f2, I would still be playing c7 and letting him have the unbalanced edge. So right now, let's play the c7. And I have this momentary diagonal control of this sort of mini diagonal across the b6 disk all the way up to e3. So I think this is probably quite a comfortable position for me right now. So I'll just grab the edge since he's attacked the edge. And right now it is a quiet move for me on b8 and a consecutive corner to a8. So I'll just go ahead and grab it and just solidify and centralize. Solidify and just stabilize my disk. So over here, I would then choose to sweep on an interior basis. I would actually choose to play the b2 move and give up the corner. Reason being, if I sweep away this b7 disc, it becomes critical in future sweep moves to the top right. So by playing that b2, even though it is an x square, I only give up the corner, which is that stable disc across. I don't really give up that much, even though it is a corner. So I'll go for that interior sweep across, and white goes for the corner, which is the only choice. I would then do that interior sweep follow-up to extend the edge to the top and just sweep on an inner edge basis. So yep, so okay, so I'll just continue to sweep internally and just give up the edge perhaps and just extend off to the right. So even though I do give up the corners on the left and on top left and the bottom right, the way that the game is actually advancing from over here on the bottom left towards the top right is actually a stable approach for me to just go in and sweep up the disc on the interior. So that's why it's called the interior sweep. So yeah, with that, I'll just do a diagonal cut across for parity and close off the game. So good game. Dominic, thank you very much. So with that, it's basically the end of the Team Australia and Team Singapore match. Okay, so with the end of all 6 rounds of the Team Australia versus Team Singapore team friendly match, perhaps. So we basically have the final result. I think over here, Australia scored a total team points of 10 against Singapore of 26, and the discount is 952 to 1,352. So I think the game started off fairly balanced in round 1, and then I think Singapore began to pull away a little bit, and definitely Australia then gained a little bit more ground towards the later rounds. So I think there were a few timeouts on the part of Australia, so definitely Australia is not a weak team, but unfortunately for the rules of this particular friendly match is for a timeout, if you have more than 4 empties, what would happen is that you would actually lose 64-0. So I think that's slightly to Singapore's advantage in terms of time. And of course, the individual rankings. For me, this time I was lucky to get through with all wins. So with 6 points and 264 discount, at the top of the table this time round. So that's probably one of the first time that I actually came on top for the team match, and of course followed by Cheeky Boy and always lose 94. So I hope you really enjoyed the video, and definitely looking forward to the next team match. Thank you very much for watching this video, and see you guys.